So let me tell you about Herman Kermsey. He was a prospector, but he had no luck in Dawson City panning for gold. So he came down to Skagway and he opened up the watch repair and curio shop that we saw downtown earlier. And he was successful in that business, but he still had gold fever. So every once in a while he'd close up shop and he'd run back up to Dawson and try his luck again panning for gold. But he still had no luck. But on one trip up there, the people asked him if he knew where to get fresh fruit. They were dying for fresh fruit and would pay almost any price for it. So Kermsey came down to Skagway and looked around, because the any price part of that story sounded really good to him. Eventually he found a large load of fresh cantaloupes. He hired some packers to help him carry those cantaloupes up over the pass. And when he arrived in Dawson City, those people were so excited to see all that fresh fruit that Herman Kermsey was able to sell bruised and damaged cantaloupes for $20 a piece. And perfect cantaloupes he was actually able to sell for the astonishing price of $50 a piece. $50 in Gold Rush era money would be worth over $1,000 in today's money for one piece of fruit. So you can see how some of those rich people were separated from their riches spending money in that fashion. Now, Herman Kermsey was hired one time by a professional gambler to make a watch chain from 10 of the largest nuggets to ever come out of the Klondike region. The watch chain weighed 3 pounds. It was a beautiful thing. But being a gambler, sometimes Renwick had bad luck. When he did, he needed to raise cash to keep his game going. To raise that cash, he would hawk his watch chain with Herman Kermsey. Later, when his luck changed for the better, he would take the cash he won and the claim check back over to Kermsey's jewelry store to redeem his watch chain. Those transactions started to happen more than once a day. It was driving Kermsey crazy, because Kermsey was an adventurer and he did not want to be in his shop all day to take care of those transactions. So he made a deal with Renwick, the gambler, where he would leave the jewelry store open. He would leave the safe inside the store unlocked. And he would leave either the cash or the watch chain in a cigar box inside the unlocked safe with a piece of paper and a pencil so Renwick could keep track of those transactions himself. And that amazing relationship lasted between those two men until the natural death of Pat Renwick. Then Herman Kermsey purchased the watch chain from his widow. But what a big change in crime in Skagway after the demise of Soapy and his gang, that you could actually leave a jewelry store open and the safe inside the jewelry store unlocked. But unfortunately, crime still did occur in Skagway, because in 1902, a man walked into the bank downtown with a pistol in one hand and 2 sticks of dynamite in the other. He said to the teller, "Give me $20,000. The teller made believe he was going back to the vault to get the cash, but he was actually heading for the back door. On his way, he yelled to his partner in the bank, "Look out, he's got a gun." Just at that same instant, the depositor came in the front door of the bank behind the robber. He so frightened the robber that the robber accidentally fired the pistol, hitting the dynamite. He blew himself up, killed himself, and he injured the other 3 men in the bank. He also did some extensive damage to the bank's interior. He blew the floor out of the bank, and he blew the windows out of the bank. The bank was very upset, because in those days the main form of currency was gold dust, which had just been blown all over the bank and was now mixed up with the explosion dust. So Kermsey was hired by the bank to recover all that gold dust. Kermsey brought in the fire department, who by 1902 had a nice hand pumper. They used that hand pumper to hose down the interior of the bank, and that washed all the dust, including the gold dust, down into the dirt where the floor used to be. Kermsey then brought in men with buckets and shovels, and they shoveled the dirt where the floor used to be, 6 inches deep, and put it into those buckets. They also shoveled the dirt 6 feet outside around the blown out windows, 6 inches deep, and they put that dirt into some buckets. They then took all these buckets of dirt over to a sluice box, where Herman Kermsey processed all that dirt just like it was gold ore. When he was finished, Herman Kermsey actually recovered more gold dust than the bank thought they lost. Evidently, gold dust had been trickling down between those floorboards for years before the explosion, and that's what accounted for all the extra gold dust. Herman Kermsey was a very honest fellow, so he made sure that the bank got all the extra gold dust. Coming up, we're going to be turning right onto the Dyea Road, which goes over to the ruins of the town of Dyea. Dyea was a competing gold rush town during the gold rush with Skagway, selling prospectors their supplies. At the height of the gold rush in 1898, Dyea had a population of 10,000 people. Dyea is where the Chilkoot Trail originates, and the Chilkoot Trail is a competing trail with the White Pass Trail. The Chilkoot Trail is shorter, but it is also steeper than the White Pass Trail, so some prospectors opted to use the Chilkoot because it was shorter and they hoped to get to the gold sooner than the other guys. But some prospectors opted to use the White Pass Trail because it was less steep and they thought probably safer. But long before the gold rush, the Tlingit Indian people used to live in Dyea, and they would use the Chilkoot Trail as their traditional trade route to trade with their inland neighbors. The Tlinkits, being a coastal tribe, used to trade dried fish, smoked fish, dried seaweed, and oil, which they rendered from a smelt-like fish called hooligans. They would render that oil into skin bags and carry those skin bags full of oil up over the pass. And they would trade them with the inland tribes for furs. That's how valuable the oil was to them, because the only alternative the inland people had to the sweet-tasting hooligan oil was bear fat, which lent a strong flavor to their food. The Tlinkits would also dry some of the hooligans out and put a wick down the fish's throats, and they would trade them with the inland people for use as candles. Can you imagine burning a candle made out of a fish inside your tent or cabin? That gives a whole new meaning to the term aromatherapy. On the left right here we have the modern-day cemetery of Skagway down below us here. On the left you can see that it is also a very small cemetery, and that's for the same reason. Many of the people that die here in Skagway, their bodies are shipped back to be buried with their families wherever they came from originally. Usually it's the people that are born in Skagway that wind up buried in that cemetery. Notice on both sides of the road here we have lots of rocks with very little soil on top of them. Just a few inches of soil. It amazes me it supports these tall trees. That was what I was talking about at the cemetery. On the left right up here we have a road that goes down to the retirement home of a famous lady newspaper reporter. This lady used to work for a newspaper called the Daily Planet. She lives right there. Superman's girlfriend right here in Skagway. Coming up on the left-hand side, we're going to make a stop at the overlook that overlooks the entire city of Skagway. You'll be able to see the whole town, your ship, and the Chilkat Mountains off in the distance. It's a magnificent view spot right here. And I was told that during World War II, this was actually a lookout for the U.S. Army to check to see if the Japanese Navy was sailing up the inlet, because the railroad back then would have been a prime target during World War II for the Japanese Navy, because it was used to carry the Lend-Lease materials from the port in Skagway to Whitehorse, the capital of the Yukon Territory, and then those materials would be trucked over the Alcan Highway to Fairbanks, where Russian pilots would pick them up and fly that Lend-Lease material over to the Soviet Union, where it could be used in the European theater. So we'll get out here and take some photographs of this beautiful photo spot. So right here you can see the entire town of Skagway, and this paved road looking area right down in front of us here is the airport. It's not a highway at all. And the Skagway Airport is the busiest airport in North America that does not have a tower. It's all visual flight rules here. There is no tower involved. And the pilots file their flight plans with the Juno Tower, so in case of emergency, the Juno Tower knows where to send the search crews. So there is the port in Skagway. You can see all the docks out there where the cruise ships are usually lined up. On a Wednesday we have 4 large ships out there, and sometimes as many as 2 small ones also. The brown structure out there is the ore processing facility. It takes the ore from the trucks that come down from the Yukon Territory with copper ore, and with that elevator system it loads it onto barges that take it down south to be processed. So you can see Skagway is nestled into the valley, and that valley of course was created by the glacier that came through 25,000 years ago, and the glacier continued and carved out the inside passage. Some parts of that water out there are as deep as 2,000 feet or more.